Good evening, and tonight we are going to follow the story of one of the most ordinary objects in human history. A food so familiar that many of us barely notice it. A food that has traveled through thousands of years, crossed continents, survived empires, and quietly accompanied humanity through almost every stage of civilization. Tonight, we are going to explore the forgotten history of bread. Before bakeries, before grocery stores, before factories, and even before cities, bread did not exist. There was a time when no one knew how to bake a loaf. There was a time when wheat fields did not stretch across the horizon. There was a time when every meal depended entirely on what could be hunted, gathered, or found in the natural world. To begin our journey, imagine yourself standing on a grassy plain more than 10,000 years ago. The air is cool. The land is wide and open. Small groups of people move slowly across the landscape. These are hunter-gatherers. Their lives are very different from our own. They do not live in permanent houses. They do not own farms. They do not visit markets. Instead, they follow the seasons. Food is never guaranteed. Every day requires observation, patience, and effort. Among the plants growing around them are wild grasses. At first glance, these grasses seem unimportant. They are not colorful. They do not produce large fruits. Their seeds are tiny and difficult to collect. Yet hidden within those small grains lies a possibility that will eventually change the course of human history. Over countless generations, people begin gathering these seeds. The work is slow. A single handful requires many minutes of effort. The grains are carefully collected and carried back to camp. Once there, another challenge begins. The seeds are hard and difficult to eat. Simply chewing them is unpleasant. So people experiment. They discover that stones can be used to crush the grains. Large flat stones become primitive grinding surfaces. Smaller stones are used to pound and grind. The process takes time. Hour after hour, hands move back and forth across the stone. Slowly the grains become a rough powder. This powder is one of humanity's earliest forms of flour. It is not the soft white flour we know today. It is coarse, uneven, often mixed with tiny fragments of stone and husk. Yet it represents something remarkable. Human beings are beginning to transform nature into something new. The flour can be mixed with water. Sometimes it is cooked. Sometimes it is eaten as a paste. Sometimes it becomes a simple porridge. These meals are basic. No recipes exist. No baker is present. No one realizes that they are taking the first steps toward creating one of the world's most important foods. Around campfires, people continue experimenting. Perhaps someone accidentally drops a mixture of grain and water onto a hot stone near the fire. The mixture dries. It becomes firmer. It develops a different texture. What emerges is something closer to a flatbread. Simple, crude, yet recognizable. For the first time, humans are creating food that is more than the sum of its ingredients. The discovery spreads slowly. There are no books, no schools, no internet. Knowledge travels through observation and memory. Parents teach children. Families teach neighbors. Generation after generation, small improvements appear. The process remains difficult. Grinding grain requires enormous effort. Producing enough flour for a family can consume hours each day. Yet people continue because grain has advantages. Unlike many fruits and vegetables, dried grain can be stored. It can survive for weeks or months. It provides security. In a world filled with uncertainty, security is valuable. As centuries pass, human communities begin paying closer attention to the plants around them. Certain grasses produce larger seeds. Some are easier to harvest. Others grow more reliably. People begin favoring particular plants. Without realizing it, they are beginning one of the most important experiments in human history: the domestication of grain. Little by little, wild plants change. Human societies change alongside them. The relationship between people and grain grows stronger. And with every passing generation, the future of bread grows a little closer. For now, however, bread remains rare. It is not yet the center of civilization. It is not yet the foundation of kingdoms. It is simply an idea taking shape beside ancient fires beneath open skies. A quiet beginning to a story that will eventually feed cities, support empires, and become one of the most familiar foods on earth. And as the evening settles over those distant landscapes, the first chapter of bread's long journey slowly comes to an end. As the centuries pass, the relationship between humans and grain continues to grow. The world is changing, although the people living through these changes may not fully realize it. Small groups of hunter-gatherers are slowly becoming something new. In several parts of the world, communities begin spending more time in the same places. Instead of constantly moving across the landscape, some groups discover that certain valleys, riverbanks, and fertile plains provide reliable sources of food. Among the plants growing in these regions are wild ancestors of wheat and barley. Year after year, people return to the same locations to gather them. As they do, an important observation begins to emerge. Seeds that fall to the ground often grow into new plants. To modern ears, this may sound obvious. But for ancient people, it represented a profound discovery. The idea that food could be encouraged to grow rather than simply gathered changed everything. At first, the process is simple. People scatter seeds near their camps. They clear away competing plants. They protect young shoots from animals. The results are imperfect, but encouraging. Slowly, agriculture begins to take shape. With agriculture comes a new challenge. Grain harvests can be large. Thousands upon thousands of seeds must be processed. The familiar grinding stones become even more important. Every household owns some version of these tools. Morning often begins with the sound of stone against stone. Women, men, and children spend countless hours turning harvested grain into flour. It is repetitive work, slow work. Yet it provides something precious, a dependable source of food. For the first time in human history, communities can begin storing significant quantities of grain. Storage pits appear. Clay containers become common. Entire villages start organizing themselves around the harvest. The future suddenly feels a little more predictable. As grain becomes more abundant, experimentation increases. Simple mixtures of flour and water are cooked on heated stones. Some are baked beside open fires. Others are placed beneath hot ashes. The results vary widely. Some breads are thick. Others are thin and crisp. Many would seem unfamiliar to modern bakers. Yet they all share something important. They are bread. Not the soft loaves found in supermarkets today. Not the sliced bread of modern kitchens. But genuine bread nonetheless. For many early farming communities, bread becomes one of the most practical foods available. It is portable. It can be shared. It can be eaten alone or combined with other foods. A traveler can carry it. A farmer can take it into the fields. A family can divide it among many people. These advantages help bread spread rapidly. Across villages and settlements, baking becomes part of everyday life. No written recipes exist. Knowledge is passed from one generation to the next. Children watch their parents work. Young bakers learn through observation. Every family develops slightly different techniques. Some prefer thicker breads. Others favor thinner flatbreads. Small local traditions begin to emerge. Bread in ancient Egypt. As the centuries continue to pass, farming communities become larger and more organized. Villages grow into towns. Towns grow into cities. And along the banks of one remarkable river, bread begins a new chapter in its story. This river is the Nile. For thousands of years, the Nile serves as the lifeline of ancient Egypt. Every year, its waters rise and spread across the surrounding land. When the floods retreat, they leave behind rich soil ideal for growing crops. Among those crops are wheat and barley. These grains become the foundation of Egyptian life. To modern observers, the Great Pyramids often dominate our image of ancient Egypt. We imagine pharaohs, temples, and golden treasures. Yet beneath all of these achievements lies something much simpler. Food. And especially bread. Without bread, ancient Egypt could never have supported its enormous population. Without bread, the workers who built monuments could not have been fed. Without bread, one of history's most famous civilizations might never have flourished. Across the Nile Valley, fields stretched toward the horizon. Farmers work carefully beneath the Egyptian sun. The growing season follows a familiar rhythm. Seeds are planted. Crops mature. Harvest time arrives. Entire communities participate in gathering grain. The harvest is a time of hard work, but also hope. A successful harvest means security. A poor harvest brings uncertainty. Once collected, grain is stored in large granaries. These structures become some of the most important buildings in Egyptian society. The grain stored inside represents wealth, stability, and survival. From these stores, grain can be distributed throughout the year. It can feed workers, support armies, supply cities, and most importantly, become bread. Every morning, throughout ancient Egypt, bakeries come to life. Some are small household operations. Others are surprisingly large. Workers begin their tasks before sunrise. The air fills with the sounds of grinding, mixing, shaping, and baking. For many Egyptians, bread is eaten every single day. In fact, bread is so important that it often serves as a form of payment. Workers may receive bread as part of their wages. Officials keep records involving bread distributions. Bread is not merely food. It is part of the economy itself. Ancient Egyptian bakers developed techniques that would seem familiar to modern bakers. Flour is mixed with water. Dough is kneaded. Ovens are carefully heated. Yet there is also an important difference. At some point, perhaps by accident, Egyptians discover fermentation. A mixture of dough is left sitting longer than expected. Natural yeasts begin to work. The dough changes. It becomes lighter. Air pockets form inside. When baked, the result is softer and fluffier than earlier flatbreads. This discovery transforms bread forever. Leavened bread becomes one of Egypt's great culinary achievements. For the first time, bread begins to resemble the loaves we know today. The process remains somewhat mysterious. Ancient bakers do not understand microorganisms. They do not know about yeast cells. Yet through observation and experience, they learn how to repeat the results. Knowledge passes from one generation to the next. Master bakers teach apprentices. Families share techniques. The art of bread making continues to improve. Egyptian bakeries produce many varieties of bread. Some are round. Some are long. Some contain dates, honey, or other ingredients. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of surprisingly diverse baking traditions. Even thousands of years later, traces of these breads can still be found. For ordinary Egyptians, bread remains the center of daily meals. A worker heading to the fields may carry bread for lunch. A family gathering for dinner may share several loaves. Travelers bring bread on long journeys. Children grow up eating it. Old people continue relying upon it. Bread accompanies every stage of life. The smell of fresh bread becomes one of the defining scents of Egyptian civilization. Imagine walking through an Egyptian town at dawn. The sun is beginning to rise. The Nile glitters in the distance. Bakers are already busy at work. Warm air drifts from ovens. People pass through the streets carrying baskets. The day is beginning. and bread is already playing its part. In many ways, bread becomes as important to Egypt as stone. Stone builds monuments. Bread sustains the people who build them. One creates the visible achievements of civilization. The other quietly supports everything beneath the surface. As centuries pass, Egypt grows stronger and more prosperous. Its influence spreads far beyond the Nile Valley. Trade routes expand. Ideas travel. And among the many things Egypt helps share with the wider world is a deeper understanding of bread. What began as simple grain mixed with water has become something far more sophisticated. A food capable of feeding cities, supporting governments, and nourishing one of history's most remarkable civilizations. As evening settles over the Nile, bakers finish their work for the day. The ovens cool. Families gather for meals. Fresh bread rests upon tables throughout the land. And the story of bread continues onward, carried by the currents of history toward new lands and new peoples. The next chapter awaits beyond the borders of Egypt. Bread in ancient Greece. As the influence of ancient Egypt spreads across the Mediterranean, ideas travel with merchants, sailors, and travelers. Among those ideas is the art of bread making. Far to the north, across the sea, another civilization is beginning to flourish. This is ancient Greece. The landscape of Greece is very different from the fertile Nile Valley. Instead of a long river surrounded by broad plains, Greece is a land of mountains, rocky coastlines, and scattered islands. Farming is often more difficult here. Fields are smaller. Soils vary greatly from place to place. Yet grain remains one of the most important crops. Like the Egyptians before them, the Greeks understand that bread provides dependable nourishment. It stores well. It travels easily. And it can feed large numbers of people. Over time, bread becomes deeply woven into everyday Greek life. By now, bread is no longer simply a basic survival food. In Greece, it begins to evolve into something more. Something closer to an art. Greek bakers experiment constantly. Different grains are used. Different baking methods appear. New shapes and textures emerge. The variety would surprise many modern people. Some historians believe that hundreds of different kinds of bread may have existed throughout the Greek world. Some loaves are simple and practical. Others are prepared for celebrations, festivals, or religious ceremonies. Each region develops its own preferences. Each baker develops personal techniques. Bread becomes both nourishment and craftsmanship. Imagine walking through a Greek marketplace on a warm morning. Merchants arrange goods beneath cloth awnings. Pottery, olives, wine, vegetables, and fish fill the stalls. Among the busiest areas are the bakeries. Fresh bread draws customers from every part of the city. The scent of baking dough drifts through the streets. People stop to purchase loaves for the day's meals. Some breads are dark and hearty. Others are lighter and softer. The choices are far greater than those available to earlier generations. For wealthy Greeks, bread can become surprisingly refined. Fine flour is carefully prepared. Special ingredients are added. Some breads are flavored with herbs, honey, or oils. The wealthy enjoy options unavailable to many ordinary citizens. Yet even among common people, bread remains central to daily life. A farmer working in the countryside carries bread into the fields. A fisherman brings bread aboard his boat. A merchant packs bread before beginning a journey. No matter one's profession, bread is almost always present. Greek society places great value on knowledge and observation. Philosophers discuss nature. Scientists study the world around them. Craftsmen seek improvement in their trades. Bakers are no exception. Techniques are refined. Ovens become more sophisticated. Methods of kneading and fermentation continue evolving. Each generation learns from the previous one. Small improvements accumulate over time. In many homes, baking remains a daily activity. Families grind grain, mix dough, prepare meals together. The process requires patience. There are no electric mixers, no modern timers, no temperature controls. Everything depends upon experience. The baker must judge the dough by touch, the oven by feel, the finished bread by sight and smell. These skills take years to master. In addition to feeding people, bread also plays an important role in religion and ceremony. Special breads are offered during festivals. Some are associated with particular gods or celebrations. Others mark important moments in family life. Bread is no longer merely food. It has become part of culture itself. As Greek cities grow more prosperous, trade expands throughout the Mediterranean. Ships travel between distant ports. Goods move across great distances. Ideas travel alongside them. Recipes spread. Techniques spread. Knowledge spreads. A baker in one city may hear about methods used hundreds of miles away. Slowly, the traditions of bread making become increasingly interconnected. Throughout this period, however, one thing remains unchanged. Bread continues to connect people to the grain fields that sustain them. No matter how advanced Greek cities become, every loaf still begins with a seed planted in the soil. Every loaf still depends upon weather, harvests, and human labor. The connection between bread and agriculture remains as strong as ever. As evening approaches, the bustling markets begin to quiet. The day's work slowly comes to an end. Families return home carrying food for supper. Fresh bread rests upon wooden tables. Children gather beside their parents. Conversations drift through open doorways. And across the Greek world, countless loaves help bring another day to a peaceful close. Yet beyond the horizon, another civilization is rising. A civilization that will build vast roads, enormous cities, and one of the largest empires the ancient world has ever seen. And like every civilization before it, it too will depend upon bread. The story now moves westward, toward ancient Rome. bread in ancient Rome. As the story of bread continues, the center of the Mediterranean world gradually shifts westward. Ancient Greece leaves a lasting influence upon history, but another civilization is rising. Its cities grow larger. Its roads stretch farther. Its armies travel across continents. And at the heart of this expanding world stands Rome. The Roman Empire eventually becomes one of the largest and most powerful civilizations of the ancient world. Millions of people live within its borders. Great cities emerge. Trade routes connect distant regions. Ships cross the Mediterranean carrying goods from every corner of the empire. Managing such a vast population requires many things: laws, roads, water, markets, and perhaps most importantly, food. Among all the foods consumed throughout the empire, bread holds a special place. For many Romans, bread is not merely part of a meal. It is the meal. A typical day often begins with bread. It appears again during midday meals, and once more in the evening. Rich or poor, nearly everyone depends upon it. As Rome grows, so does the challenge of feeding its population. The city itself eventually becomes enormous by ancient standards. Hundreds of thousands of people live within its boundaries. Some estimates suggest that more than 1 million people may have lived in Rome during its peak. Feeding such numbers requires organization on a remarkable scale. Grain arrives from across the empire. Ships carry wheat from regions such as Egypt and North Africa. Huge quantities of grain enter Roman ports every year. Without these shipments, the city could not survive. Once the grain arrives, another enormous task begins. It must be milled into flour. It must be transported. And eventually it must become bread. Throughout Roman cities, bakeries become a familiar sight. Many are far larger than those found in earlier civilizations. Some operate almost continuously. Workers rise before dawn. The ovens are heated. The dough is prepared. The day's production begins. Archaeologists have discovered remarkable evidence of Roman bakeries. In the ancient city of Pompeii, preserved beneath volcanic ash, entire bakeries have survived for nearly 2,000 years. Millstones still stand where they once turned grain into flour. Ovens remain in place. Workspaces are frozen in time. These discoveries offer a rare glimpse into the daily lives of Roman bakers. The work is demanding. Flour covers clothing and hands. The heat from the ovens can be intense. Hours are long. Yet the demand for bread remains constant. Every day, thousands of customers require fresh supplies. For ordinary Romans, the local bakery becomes an important part of daily life. A person may stop by each morning to purchase bread for the household. Fresh loaves are carried through busy streets. The scent of baking bread drifts between stone buildings. It becomes one of the defining smells of urban life. Roman bakers produce a surprising variety of breads. Some are simple and inexpensive. Others are carefully prepared using finer flour and additional ingredients. Shapes vary widely. Certain loaves are even divided into sections, making them easier to share. Many of these designs can still be recognized in preserved archaeological finds. One of Rome's most important political realities is the connection between bread and stability. Leaders understand that hungry populations can become restless. Food shortages can create unrest. As a result, grain supplies become a matter of public concern. Government officials closely monitor grain distribution. In some periods, free or subsidized grain is provided to citizens. The goal is simple: keep people fed. Keep the city functioning. Bread becomes more than nourishment. It becomes part of public policy, part of governance, part of the machinery that keeps the empire running. Meanwhile, outside the cities, countless farmers continue the work that makes everything possible. Across vast fields, grain is planted and harvested. Entire agricultural systems exist to support urban populations. The connection between countryside and city remains strong. Without farmers, there is no grain. Without grain, there is no bread. Without bread, the empire struggles to function. As centuries pass, Roman baking techniques continue to improve. Knowledge spreads throughout the empire. A baker in a distant province may use methods similar to those employed in Rome itself. Trade helps share ideas. Movement helps share skills. Bread becomes one of the many things that connect diverse regions of the empire. Despite all this sophistication, however, the basic process remains familiar. Grain, flour, water, heat. The same essential ingredients that existed thousands of years earlier remain unchanged. Humanity has refined the process, but not replaced it. And perhaps that is part of bread's enduring appeal. Its simplicity, its reliability, its ability to nourish generation after generation. As evening falls over Rome, the city's streets slowly quiet. The markets begin to close. The ovens cool. Families gather inside homes and apartments. Fresh bread rests upon tables. The day's work is finished. Tomorrow, the bakers will rise before dawn and begin again. For bread never truly sleeps. In every corner of the empire, another loaf is always being prepared. Another meal is being shared. Another chapter in bread's long story is quietly unfolding. And yet, beyond the borders of Rome, new ages are approaching. The empire will eventually fade. The ancient world will change. But bread will remain, waiting patiently to accompany humanity into the medieval centuries ahead. A day in the life of a medieval baker. As the Roman Empire gradually fades from history, Europe enters a new era. Cities become smaller. Trade becomes less reliable. Life slows down. Yet throughout these changing centuries, one thing remains remarkably constant. People still need bread. Every day. In every village, town, and city. and behind every loaf stands a baker. Tonight, let us imagine ourselves stepping into the life of one such baker. The year is somewhere in the Middle Ages. Perhaps the 12th century. Perhaps the 13th. The exact date matters little. The routine remains much the same. The baker's day begins long before sunrise. While most of the village still sleeps, a faint glow already shines from the bakery. The baker rises in darkness. The air is cool. The streets outside are silent. Only the occasional sound of an animal disturbs the stillness. Inside the bakery, however, work is already beginning. The first task is preparing the fire. Unlike modern ovens, medieval ovens require careful management. Wood must be gathered. Logs must be arranged. The fire must burn long enough to heat thick stone walls. This process can take hours. The baker knows that timing is everything. Too little heat and the bread will not bake properly. Too much heat and it may burn. As flames flicker inside the oven, the baker begins preparing the dough. Large wooden bowls hold flour. Water is added carefully. Sometimes a small amount of salt. Sometimes a starter made from previous batches of dough. The ingredients are simple. The skill lies in how they are combined. Hands move slowly through the mixture. The dough begins to take shape. Kneading requires strength and patience. There are no machines to help. Everything depends upon human effort. For many bakers, this routine repeats day after day, year after year. Yet there is comfort in repetition. Each movement is familiar. Each task follows a rhythm learned through experience. Outside, the first hints of dawn begin appearing on the horizon. The village slowly awakens. Farmers prepare for work. Merchants arrange their goods. Children begin their daily chores. Meanwhile, the bakery grows warmer. The scent of rising dough fills the room. Soon customers will arrive. Bread occupies a special place in medieval society. For many families, it provides the majority of daily calories. A poor harvest may reduce its availability. A good harvest brings relief. In some regions, people consume bread at nearly every meal. Different social classes often eat different kinds of bread. Wealthier households may enjoy lighter loaves made from finer flour. Poorer families often rely on darker breads made from rye, barley, or mixed grains. Yet regardless of social status, bread remains essential. As morning progresses, the oven reaches the proper temperature. The baker carefully removes the remaining embers. Long wooden tools are used to place loaves inside. The heavy door closes. Now comes the waiting. The smell of baking bread gradually spreads through nearby streets. Few scents are more welcoming. Villagers recognize it immediately. Some begin making their way toward the bakery. Others send children to purchase bread for the household. Soon the bakery becomes one of the busiest places in town. Fresh loaves emerge from the oven. Golden crusts crackle softly as they cool. Customers inspect the bread carefully. Purchases are made. Conversations are exchanged. News travels through the bakery almost as often as bread itself. In many communities, the baker occupies an important position. Everyone depends upon the work being done here. A successful baker earns trust and respect. The hours, however, are long. Once the morning rush ends, additional tasks remain. More dough must be prepared. Supplies must be checked. Wood must be gathered for future baking. Tools must be cleaned. There is rarely a moment when nothing needs attention. As afternoon turns toward evening, the pace finally begins to slow. The last customers depart. The ovens gradually cool. The baker takes a moment to rest. Outside, smoke rises gently from village chimneys. People gather for supper. Fresh bread appears on tables throughout the community. Some loaves are eaten immediately. Others are saved for the following day. The baker's work has touched nearly every household. Yet few people stop to consider how much labor lies behind each loaf. The gathering of grain, the milling of flour, the kneading of dough, the management of fire, the careful timing of every step. All of it remains largely invisible once the bread reaches the table. As darkness settles across the village, the bakery grows quiet. The fire fades. The tools are put away. The baker prepares for sleep. Tomorrow the process will begin again. Before sunrise. Before the streets awaken. Before most people even open their eyes. Because in the medieval world, as in every age before and after, bread never stops being kneaded. And somewhere, a baker is always preparing the next loaf. What peasants really ate. When people imagine the Middle Ages, they often picture grand castles, wealthy nobles, and elaborate feasts. Long tables covered with roasted meats. Golden goblets. Lavish banquets. Yet for the vast majority of people living during medieval times, daily life looked very different. Most people were peasants. They worked the land. They tended animals. They planted crops. And when they sat down to eat, their meals were usually simple. At the center of many of those meals was bread. Not the soft white bread found in modern supermarkets. Not the carefully sliced loaves wrapped in plastic. Medieval bread was often darker, heavier, and far more closely connected to the local harvest. For a peasant family, bread represented both nourishment and security. A good supply of bread meant stability. An empty bread basket could signal hardship. Every year revolved around agriculture. The success of the harvest determined what would appear on the table throughout the coming months. Different regions grew different grains. In some places wheat flour was available. In others rye dominated. Barley was common. Oats were used in certain areas. Many loaves contained mixtures of several grains. The exact ingredients often depended on what could be grown nearby. The quality of bread also varied greatly. A wealthy noble might enjoy bread made from finely sifted wheat flour. The flour would be lighter in color and softer in texture. For peasants, however, flour often contained more bran and coarse particles. The resulting bread was darker and denser. Yet it remained filling and nutritious. A single loaf might provide a large portion of a family's daily calories. Imagine a small medieval cottage. The morning sun filters through a tiny window. A family gathers around a rough wooden table. Breakfast is simple. Perhaps a piece of bread. Maybe a little cheese. Sometimes a bowl of pottage, a thick soup made from grains and vegetables. Bread accompanies nearly every meal. It is familiar, reliable, comforting. For children growing up in these communities, the smell of fresh bread is one of the defining sense of home. In many villages, families do not always bake bread inside their own houses. Instead, they may use a communal oven. These ovens serve the entire community. On baking days, villagers arrive carrying prepared dough. The oven is heated once. Many loaves are baked together. The process becomes both practical and social. People exchange news, discuss weather, talk about crops, while waiting for bread to bake. Bread is not merely food. It helps bring communities together. Throughout the year, the nature of bread changes with the seasons. After a successful harvest, supplies are plentiful. Loaves may be larger. Meals feel more secure. As winter progresses, however, stored grain slowly disappears. Families become more cautious. Every handful of flour matters. Every loaf must last. The connection between bread and survival remains constant. Some years are especially difficult. Poor weather damages crops. Heavy rains destroy fields. Drought reduces harvests. In such times, bread becomes scarce. Families may stretch their flour by adding other ingredients. Beans, peas, ground roots. Whatever can help make supplies last longer. The resulting bread may not taste particularly good, but it keeps hunger away. And in difficult years, that is enough. Medieval people developed remarkable resourcefulness. Waste is avoided whenever possible. Even stale bread remains useful. Hard loaves can be softened in soups and stews. Crumbs may be reused in cooking. Nothing is casually discarded. Food requires too much labor to waste. The journey from field to loaf involves countless hours of effort. Planting, harvesting, threshing, grinding, mixing, baking. Every step requires work. When viewed through this lens, bread becomes something more than a simple food. It becomes a symbol of labor itself. A reminder of the countless hands involved in sustaining daily life. As evening arrives, families gather once again around the table. The meal may be modest. A little bread. A bowl of stew. Perhaps some vegetables from the garden. Yet after a long day of work, such meals provide comfort. The bread is shared. Stories are exchanged. The worries of the day begin to fade. Outside, darkness settles over fields and forests. Inside, the warmth of the hearth glows softly. And on countless tables across medieval Europe, bread continues performing the quiet task it has carried out for thousands of years. Feeding ordinary people, one loaf at a time. While kings and nobles leave their names in history books, bread remains the faithful companion of everyone else. The farmers, the laborers, the families, the millions of ordinary people whose lives rarely appear in grand historical records. And perhaps that is what makes the story of bread so remarkable. It is not merely the history of a food. It is the history of everyday life itself. Bread and hunger. For most of history, bread has represented comfort, nourishment, and stability. Yet bread has also had another side. A more uncertain side. A side connected to failed harvests, empty granaries, and the constant fear of hunger. To understand the true importance of bread, we must remember how fragile food systems once were. Today, if one region experiences a poor harvest, food can often be transported from elsewhere. Ships cross oceans. Trucks travel highways. Railways connect distant places. Modern supply networks provide a degree of protection against local shortages. For most of human history, however, such protection did not exist. A bad harvest in your region was often your problem alone. And because bread depended upon grain, the success or failure of grain crops could determine the fate of entire communities. Imagine a farming village waiting for harvest season. The fields have been planted. Months of labor have already passed. Now everything depends upon nature. Perhaps rain arrives at the right time. Perhaps it does not. A late frost may damage young plants. A drought may dry the soil. Insects may consume precious crops. Storms may flatten fields just before harvest. Every year contains uncertainty. Every harvest contains risk. When conditions are favorable, the grain stores fill. Families feel relief. The coming winter seems manageable. Bread remains plentiful. But when harvests fail, life changes quickly. At first, people become cautious. Bread portions become smaller. Families begin stretching their supplies. Meals become simpler. The atmosphere shifts from comfort to concern. As shortages continue, prices rise. Flour becomes more expensive. Grain becomes harder to obtain. Those with savings may manage for a time. Those without resources face greater difficulties. Throughout history, many societies have experienced periods when bread became scarce. In some cases, shortages lasted months. In others, years. Entire generations remembered difficult harvests long after they ended. Stories of famine were passed from parents to children. The memory of hunger lingered. One reason bread carried such emotional importance was its role as a daily necessity. People could adapt to the absence of luxury foods. They could survive without sweets. They could manage without many comforts. But bread was different. For millions of people, it formed the foundation of the diet. Its absence was immediately felt. Imagine walking through a town during a difficult year. The bakery still opens each morning. The ovens still burn. Yet something feels different. The lines are longer. The loaves are smaller. Conversations are quieter. People watch prices carefully. Everyone hopes conditions will improve. Throughout medieval and early modern history, governments often paid close attention to grain supplies. Rulers understood something important. Hungry populations become anxious. Anxious populations become restless. A shortage of bread could create tension throughout an entire region. As a result, grain storage became a matter of public concern. Granaries were built. Stocks were monitored. Officials attempted to prevent shortages whenever possible. Sometimes these efforts succeeded. Sometimes they did not. In particularly difficult years, communities developed creative strategies to survive. Alternative foods were gathered. Different grains were used. Recipes changed. Families relied upon whatever resources remained available. Human resilience often proved remarkable. Yet hardship could not always be avoided. The fear of hunger remained a constant companion for many generations. And still, despite these challenges, bread endured. Year after year. Harvest after harvest. People continued planting grain. Continued grinding flour. Continued baking loaves. Because bread represented hope as much as nourishment. A successful loaf meant another day of security. Another meal shared around the table. Another reminder that life could continue. As centuries passed, agricultural knowledge slowly improved. Farmers learned new techniques. Crop rotations became more common. Storage methods improved. Transportation gradually became more reliable. The risk of severe shortages never disappeared completely, but some dangers became easier to manage. Little by little, humanity became better at protecting its food supply. Yet the lessons of earlier centuries were not forgotten. People remembered how important bread truly was. Not merely as food, but as a foundation of stability. A symbol of survival. A daily reminder of the delicate relationship between human beings and the land that feeds them. As evening falls over the countryside, the fields grow quiet. The day's work is done. Farmers look across their crops and hope for favorable weather. Families sit down to simple meals. Fresh bread rests on wooden tables. For tonight, at least, there is enough. And in a world where uncertainty has always existed, sometimes that is all anyone can ask for. The story of bread continues onward. Soon it will cross oceans, travel with settlers, and find a new home in a growing land known as America. Colonial America and bread. As the centuries move forward, bread begins another remarkable journey. This time, it crosses an ocean. European settlers bring many traditions with them to the Americas. Languages, customs, tools, recipes. And among the most important of these traditions is the art of baking bread. Life in colonial America is often challenging. Settlements are small. Supplies can be limited. The wilderness stretches far beyond the edges of towns and villages. Every household must learn to be resourceful. In such a world, bread once again becomes an essential part of daily life. Imagine arriving in a small colonial settlement during the early morning hours. A thin layer of mist hangs over the fields. Wooden homes stand quietly beneath the rising sun. Smoke curls from stone chimneys. The day is beginning. Inside many homes, preparations for baking are already underway. Unlike modern kitchens, colonial kitchens revolve around the hearth. The fireplace serves many purposes. It provides heat. It offers light. And it functions as the center of cooking. Bread is often baked in brick ovens connected to these hearths, or in specially designed bake ovens located nearby. The process requires patience and skill. Wood must be gathered. Fires must be carefully managed. Temperatures must be judged by experience rather than thermometers. Every loaf reflects the baker's knowledge. In colonial America, grain remains enormously important. Wheat is grown in many regions. Rye and corn also play significant roles. Over time, settlers adapt their baking traditions to local conditions. New ingredients become available. New techniques emerge. Old recipes are modified. Bread slowly develops a distinctly American character. Corn, in particular, becomes an important addition to many diets. Indigenous peoples have cultivated maize for thousands of years. European settlers learned from this existing knowledge. Cornmeal begins appearing in breads, porridges, and other foods. The blending of traditions creates new forms of baking that would have been unfamiliar in Europe. Life on the frontier often requires even greater flexibility. Families living far from towns cannot always rely on professional bakers. Instead, they bake their own bread. Every household develops practical skills. Parents teach children. Knowledge passes from one generation to the next. Bread making remains a household responsibility shared by many family members. Imagine a frontier cabin during the winter. Outside, snow covers the landscape. Cold winds move through the trees. Inside, the warmth of the hearth provides comfort. A loaf of bread bakes slowly in the oven. The scent fills the room. Simple moments like these help transform a small cabin into a home. Bread offers more than nourishment. It offers familiarity, a connection to routine, a sense of stability in an often uncertain environment. Travelers moving across colonial America frequently carry bread with them. Journeys can be long. Roads are rough. Food must be practical. Bread travels well. It can accompany settlers, traders, soldiers, and explorers. Throughout the colonies, bread becomes a reliable companion for daily life. As towns grow larger, bakeries begin appearing in increasing numbers. Customers visit each morning. Fresh loaves are displayed for sale. The familiar relationship between baker and community continues much as it had for centuries in Europe. The tools may differ slightly. The ingredients may vary. Yet the essential process remains unchanged. Grain becomes flour. Flour becomes dough. Dough becomes bread. Some things in history change remarkably quickly. Others remain surprisingly constant. Bread belongs firmly in the second category. Throughout periods of enormous political and social transformation, it continues quietly performing the same role it has always performed. Feeding people. Supporting families. Helping communities thrive. As the colonies expand and populations grow, agriculture becomes increasingly important. Fields spread across the countryside. Harvests become larger. Mills process growing quantities of grain. The foundations of a new nation slowly take shape. And bread remains present every step of the way. By now, thousands of years have passed since the first grains were gathered by ancient hunter-gatherers. Yet if one were to place an early flatbread beside a colonial loaf, the connection would still be visible. The ingredients remain familiar. The purpose remains familiar. The human need remains familiar. As evening settles over a colonial village, families gather around wooden tables. Candles flicker softly. Conversations drift through warm rooms. Fresh bread rests beside bowls of stew and simple meals. Outside, darkness spreads across the landscape. Inside, the comforting presence of bread reminds everyone of something timeless. No matter how much the world changes, some traditions continue. And few traditions have endured longer than the simple act of baking bread. The story, however, is about to enter a new age. An age of machines, factories, steam power, and inventions that will transform bread forever. The Industrial Revolution and the transformation of bread. For thousands of years, the process of making bread changes only gradually. Generation after generation, bakers rely upon familiar tools. Grain is harvested by hand. Flour is ground using stones. Dough is mixed by human effort. Loaves are baked in ovens heated with wood or coal. The details vary from place to place, but the overall rhythm remains remarkably familiar. Then, during the 18th and 19th centuries, something extraordinary begins to happen. A wave of innovation spreads across parts of Europe and North America. New machines appear. Factories emerge. Transportation improves. Entire industries are transformed. Historians later call this period the Industrial Revolution. And bread is no exception. At first, the changes seem small. A new milling machine here. An improved oven there. Yet over time, these innovations begin to reshape every stage of bread production. Imagine visiting a flour mill before the Industrial Revolution. The process is slow and labor-intensive. Water wheels or windmills may assist with grinding, but output remains limited. Workers constantly monitor the equipment. Production depends heavily on weather and local conditions. Now imagine visiting a modern industrial mill of the 19th century. The scale is entirely different. Steam-powered machinery operates with astonishing efficiency. Large quantities of grain are processed far more quickly than ever before. For the first time, flour can be produced on a truly massive scale. This abundance has important consequences. Bread becomes more accessible. Cities can support larger populations. Growing urban centers require enormous quantities of food, and industrial production helps meet that demand. At the same time, transportation networks improve dramatically. Railroads spread across countries. Steamships cross oceans. Grain can now travel much farther than before. A poor harvest in one region no longer guarantees disaster. Food can be imported from elsewhere. The world becomes increasingly connected. Bread begins to participate in a global network of production and trade. Inside bakeries, new technologies continue to appear. Mechanical mixers reduce some of the physical labor previously required. Improved ovens allow for greater consistency. Large commercial bakeries become increasingly common. Instead of producing dozens of loaves each day, some bakeries now produce hundreds or even thousands. The scale would astonish medieval bakers. For consumers, these changes bring both advantages and adjustments. Bread becomes more widely available. Prices often become more stable. Urban workers can purchase bread more easily than many previous generations. Yet some people notice differences. Traditional methods begin competing with industrial efficiency. The relationship between baker and customer changes. In earlier centuries, many people knew the individuals who baked their bread. Now, increasingly, bread comes from larger operations serving entire cities. Another significant development involves flour itself. Industrial milling techniques produce extremely fine white flour. For many consumers, white bread becomes a symbol of quality and prosperity. Its appearance suggests refinement. Its texture feels soft and uniform. Demand grows rapidly. By the late 19th century, white bread has become highly popular in many regions. Yet not everyone views these changes positively. Some observers worry that traditional baking skills are disappearing. Others question whether highly refined flour is always the healthiest option. These debates continue for generations and remain familiar even today. Throughout all these transformations, however, one thing remains unchanged. People still gather around tables. Families still share meals. Workers still rely upon bread for nourishment. Children still grow up with the scent of fresh baking. The tools may evolve. The methods may evolve. But the human relationship with bread continues. Imagine a city street during the late 19th century. Horse-drawn wagons move through busy avenues. Factories operate in the distance. Steam rises from industrial buildings. And somewhere nearby, a bakery is preparing the next batch of loaves. The scene feels very different from a medieval village. Yet the essential purpose remains exactly the same. Providing food. Providing comfort. Providing a familiar part of daily life. As the Industrial Revolution progresses, bread enters the modern era. Mass production becomes possible. Distribution becomes more efficient. Entire populations benefit from greater access to food. At the same time, old traditions continue surviving alongside new technologies. Small bakeries remain. Family recipes endure. Local baking customs persist. History rarely erases the past completely. Instead, old and new often coexist. And so bread continues its journey. A journey that began beside ancient campfires and now extends into bustling industrial cities. The story is far from over. New inventions will continue appearing. New recipes will emerge. New cultures will leave their mark upon bread. Yet beneath all these changes lies a simple truth. For thousands of years, bread has adapted to every age it encounters. And it shows no sign of stopping. As evening settles over the industrial city, bakery windows glow softly in the fading light. Fresh loaves cool on shelves. Customers carry bread home through crowded streets. And another chapter in the long history of bread quietly comes to a close. Bread around the world. By now, our journey has carried us across thousands of years. We have followed bread from prehistoric campfires to ancient cities, from medieval villages to industrial bakeries. Yet despite everything we have explored, we have only seen part of the story. Because bread is not simply the food of one civilization. It is not the creation of one culture. It belongs to the entire world. Wherever grain has grown, people have found ways to transform it into something nourishing, portable, and comforting. The result is an astonishing variety of breads. Some are soft. Some are crisp. Some are thick and hearty. Others are so thin they can be folded with ease. Each reflects the environment, resources, and traditions of the people who make it. Imagine traveling across the world, stopping in different communities and observing the breads that appear on their tables. In one region, bakers prepare large round loaves with crisp crusts. In another, families cook thin flatbreads on heated stones. Elsewhere, dough is stretched, shaped, or folded into entirely different forms. The ingredients may change. The methods may change. Yet the underlying idea remains familiar. Grain, flour, water, heat. Human creativity has taken these simple elements and produced extraordinary diversity. Across the Middle East, flatbreads have been prepared for thousands of years. Many are baked quickly in hot ovens. Some puff dramatically as steam forms inside. Others remain thin and flexible. These breads often accompany nearly every meal. They serve as both food and utensil, helping people scoop and share dishes around a communal table. In South Asia, countless varieties of bread appear. Some are cooked on flat metal surfaces. Others are baked against the walls of traditional ovens. Different regions favor different grains and techniques. The variety is immense. Generations of bakers have refined methods that remain popular even today. Across Europe, bread traditions continue evolving. French villages become known for long, crusty loaves. German regions develop dense rye breads. Italian communities create countless local specialties. Every region develops its own identity through baking. Travel only a short distance, and the bread may change completely. Across Africa, bread takes many forms as well. Local grains influence recipes. Climate influences baking methods. Communities adapt traditions to fit their surroundings. The result is a remarkable collection of foods connected by a common purpose. In the Americas, indigenous traditions continue alongside influences brought by settlers and immigrants. Corn-based breads remain important in many regions. European baking traditions blend with local ingredients. New combinations emerge. The story of bread becomes increasingly global. One of the most fascinating aspects of bread is its ability to travel. When people migrate, they often carry recipes with them. Families moving to new countries bring familiar techniques. Immigrants open bakeries. Communities recreate beloved foods from home. Bread becomes a bridge between past and present. A connection between generations. A reminder of places left behind. Imagine entering a bakery in a distant city. The language may be unfamiliar. The architecture may be different. Yet the smell of fresh bread feels instantly recognizable. It crosses cultural boundaries with remarkable ease. People from vastly different backgrounds often share the same appreciation for a warm loaf fresh from the oven. This universal quality helps explain why bread has endured for so long. It adapts. It evolves. It welcomes change without losing its essential character. A loaf baked in one country may look entirely different from a loaf baked elsewhere. Yet both belong to the same long tradition stretching back thousands of years. As global trade expands, ingredients become easier to exchange. Ideas travel faster. Recipes spread widely. A baker may learn techniques originating on the other side of the world. Traditional methods continue thriving even as new influences arrive. The result is a rich tapestry of baking traditions that continues growing today. And still, despite all this variety, bread remains closely tied to everyday life. People purchase it on their way home from work. Families share it during meals. Children eat it at breakfast. Travelers carry it on journeys. Across continents and cultures, bread continues performing the same quiet role it has always performed. Providing nourishment. Providing comfort. Providing familiarity. As evening settles across the world, ovens cool in countless bakeries. Some stand in busy cities, others in small villages. Some use advanced technology, others rely upon methods passed down through generations. Yet everywhere, the day's final loaves are being prepared. And everywhere, people continue participating in one of humanity's oldest traditions: the simple act of making bread. A tradition that connects distant places, different cultures, and countless generations through a shared experience. The story is now approaching its final chapters. But before we conclude, there is one important question remaining. How exactly did bread help shape civilization itself? How bread changed civilization? As our journey through the history of bread begins to approach its conclusion, it is worth pausing for a moment to consider a remarkable question. What would human civilization look like without bread? At first, the question may seem unusual. After all, bread is only one food among many. Human beings can survive on countless different diets. Yet when we look carefully at history, bread appears again and again at some of civilization's most important turning points. It is present when the first farming villages emerge. It is present when cities grow. It is present when trade networks expand. It is present when kingdoms rise and empires flourish. For thousands of years, bread has quietly supported the foundations upon which civilization is built. The story begins with agriculture. Before farming, most humans lived in relatively small groups. People moved frequently. Food had to be gathered or hunted. Population sizes remained limited. Life was closely tied to the rhythms of nature. Then agriculture began to change everything. The cultivation of grain allowed communities to produce food in larger quantities than ever before. Unlike many foods, grain could be stored. A harvest collected in one season could help sustain people through the next. This ability to store food transformed human society. For the first time, large permanent settlements became possible. Villages expanded. Towns appeared. Cities followed. And wherever grain was grown, bread soon followed as well. Imagine one of the world's first cities. Thousands of people lived together within a relatively small area. Not everyone grows food. Some become potters. Others become builders. Others become merchants. A few become rulers or administrators. This specialization is only possible because enough food exists to support people who are not directly involved in agriculture. Bread helps make that possible. A reliable food supply allows societies to become more complex. As cities grow, trade expands. Grain moves from farms into urban centers. Bread moves from bakeries into homes. The relationship between countryside and city becomes increasingly important. Roads are built. Markets emerge. Economic systems develop. And throughout it all, bread remains one of the most common products exchanged and consumed. Bread also influences labor. Consider the workers who built ancient monuments. the laborers who constructed roads, the sailors who crossed seas, the soldiers who marched across continents. Many of these people depended heavily on bread. Large-scale projects require reliable food. Reliable food often means grain, and grain often becomes bread. In this way, bread helps support achievements that appear entirely unrelated to baking. The connection may not always be obvious, but it is real. Even politics becomes linked to bread. Throughout history, rulers have paid close attention to grain supplies. They understood that food security often influences social stability. A city with abundant bread tends to feel calmer. A city facing shortages often experiences anxiety. The relationship between food and public order has shaped countless decisions throughout history. Bread also encourages innovation. Farmers seek better harvests. Millers develop more efficient equipment. Bakers improve their techniques. Transport systems evolve to move grain more effectively. Entire industries emerge around the production and distribution of bread. What begins as a simple mixture of flour and water eventually supports a vast network of human activity. And yet, despite all its historical importance, bread rarely receives the attention given to kings, generals, or famous inventions. History books often focus on dramatic events. Wars, battles, political struggles. Bread operates differently. Its influence is quiet, steady, persistent. It shapes everyday life rather than dramatic headlines. Perhaps that is why it is so easy to overlook. Yet without bread and other grain-based foods, many familiar chapters of human history might have unfolded very differently. The growth of cities may have been slower. Populations may have remained smaller. Trade networks may have developed differently. Civilization itself may have taken another path. As we reflect on these possibilities, bread begins to appear in a new light. Not merely as food, not merely as a recipe, but as a partner in humanity's long journey. A companion present through thousands of years of change. A simple creation that helped support some of the most complex societies ever built. Imagine standing in a bakery today. Fresh loaves rest on shelves. Customers come and go. The scene feels ordinary, familiar. Yet hidden within that ordinary moment is an extraordinary history. A history stretching back more than 10,000 years. A history connecting ancient farmers, Egyptian bakers, Roman millers, medieval villagers, colonial settlers, and modern families. All linked together through one simple food. As evening settles and the bakery doors close for the night, it becomes clear that bread's greatest achievement may not be any single invention or innovation. Its greatest achievement may simply be its reliability. Generation after generation, century after century, civilization changes. Empires rise and fall. Technologies evolve. Yet bread remains, quietly continuing its work, quietly helping sustain the world around it. Modern bread and the future of baking. As we arrive in the modern world, bread occupies a unique position in human history. Few foods have remained so familiar for so long. Thousands of years have passed since the first grains were gathered from wild fields. Entire civilizations have risen and disappeared. Languages have changed. Borders have shifted. Technologies have transformed daily life. Yet bread remains. A visitor from ancient Egypt might be astonished by modern cities, automobiles, and computers. But if presented with a loaf of bread, they would immediately recognize its purpose. That continuity is remarkable. Today, bread is available almost everywhere. Large factories produce millions of loaves each day. Supermarkets display entire aisles dedicated to baked goods. Customers can choose from countless varieties. White bread, whole wheat bread, sourdough, rye bread, multigrain bread, flatbreads, artisan loaves. The selection would seem almost unimaginable to people living in earlier centuries. Behind this abundance lies a highly organized system. Farmers cultivate enormous fields. Advanced machinery plants and harvests crops. Mills process grain with incredible efficiency. Transportation networks move ingredients across continents. Modern bakeries combine traditional knowledge with sophisticated technology. The journey from field to table has become faster and more reliable than ever before. Yet despite these advances, many ancient practices survive. Walk into a small neighborhood bakery, and you may witness techniques that would feel familiar to bakers from centuries ago. Hands still knead dough. Starters are still carefully maintained. Ovens still glow with warmth. Patience still matters. Skill still matters. The human element remains important. In recent decades, many people have developed a renewed interest in traditional baking. Artisan bakeries have become increasingly popular. Home baking has experienced periods of revival. Ancient grains are being rediscovered. Old recipes are being studied and preserved. Some bakers intentionally slow down the process, embracing methods that require time and attention. In a world that often moves quickly, bread offers an opportunity to slow down. There is something calming about watching dough rise. Something satisfying about shaping a loaf by hand. Something comforting about the scent of fresh bread filling a room. Perhaps this helps explain why baking remains beloved even in an age of automation. Bread provides more than nourishment. It provides an experience, a connection to history, a connection to craftsmanship, a connection to countless generations who performed the same tasks long before us. The future of bread continues to evolve as well. Researchers develop new farming methods. Bakers experiment with different ingredients. Consumers explore new tastes and textures. Climate conditions encourage innovation. Technology creates new possibilities. Yet whatever changes may come, certain fundamentals are likely to remain. Grain, flour, water, time, heat. These simple elements have carried bread through thousands of years. They will likely continue doing so for many years to come. Imagine a bakery early in the morning. The city outside is still quiet. The first light of dawn begins to appear. Inside, a baker prepares dough. The scene could belong to almost any century. The equipment might be different. The good night reflection and ending. And so, as our journey through the history of bread draws to a close, the world around us begins to grow quiet. The ovens have cooled. The markets have emptied. The bakers have finished their work for the day. Across thousands of years of history, evening has arrived once more. Tonight, we have traveled farther than we may have realized. We began beside ancient campfires, where early humans gathered wild grains and experimented with simple mixtures of flour and water. We stood among the first farming communities as agriculture slowly transformed human life. We walked through the bakeries of ancient Egypt, where bread helped sustain one of history's greatest civilizations. We wandered the markets of Greece and the crowded streets of Rome. We watched medieval bakers rise before dawn and peasant families share simple meals around wooden tables. We crossed oceans with settlers and followed bread into new lands. We witnessed factories and machines reshape production during the Industrial Revolution. And finally, we arrived in the modern world, where bread remains a familiar part of daily life. Throughout all these centuries, one thing remained surprisingly constant. People gathered around food. Families shared meals. Communities depended upon one another. And bread quietly accompanied them through every stage of history. It was never the loudest part of the story. It rarely appeared at the center of great monuments. Few kings built statues to celebrate it. Few armies marched beneath banners decorated with loaves. Yet bread remained present. Always present. A silent companion to humanity's journey. There is something comforting about that thought. In a world that changes constantly, bread represents continuity. The people of the past were different from us in many ways. They wore different clothing, spoke different languages, lived in different homes. Yet they also experienced familiar moments. The warmth of a kitchen, the smell of baking bread, the comfort of sharing a meal at the end of a long day. These small experiences connect us across thousands of years. Perhaps that is one reason history feels so fascinating. The farther we travel into the past, the more we discover how much people still had in common. A medieval baker worrying about tomorrow's customers. A Roman family purchasing bread in the market. An Egyptian worker carrying a loaf home after a long day. Though separated by centuries, each would understand something that remains true today. Everyone needs nourishment. Everyone seeks comfort. Everyone appreciates simple moments of peace. Imagine, for a moment, a loaf of bread resting on a wooden table. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing grand. Just a simple loaf. Yet hidden within it is an incredible story. The story of agriculture. The story of trade. The story of migration. The story of innovation. The story of civilization itself. Thousands of years of human effort brought that loaf into existence. Farmers planted grain. Millers ground flour. Bakers shaped dough. Families passed knowledge from one generation to the next. Countless hands contributed to the process. Countless lives became part of the story. And perhaps that is what makes bread so remarkable. Not its complexity, but its simplicity. It is a reminder that history is not only made by emperors and armies. History is also made by ordinary people performing ordinary tasks. Growing crops. Preparing meals. Caring for families. Building communities. These quiet activities often shape the world just as much as dramatic events. As the night grows deeper, imagine the countless bakeries that have existed throughout history. Ancient ovens glowing beneath Egyptian skies. Roman bakeries bustling before sunrise. Medieval ovens warming village streets. Colonial hearths crackling softly in frontier homes. Modern bakeries preparing tomorrow's bread. Each one part of a chain stretching across thousands of years. A chain that continues even now. Somewhere, at this very moment, a baker is preparing dough. Somewhere, grain is being harvested. Somewhere, fresh bread is cooling on a rack. The story continues. And perhaps it always will. For as long as people gather together to share meals, bread will likely remain part of human life. A simple food. A timeless companion. A quiet witness to history. And now, as our own journey comes to an end, it is time to rest. The ovens are silent. The village sleeps. The cities grow calm. The stars shine overhead. And the long history of bread gently fades into the night. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of humanity's oldest and most familiar foods. Wherever you are, I hope you have enjoyed our travels through the centuries. And as sleep begins to settle in, may your thoughts drift as peacefully as the scent of fresh bread carried on a cool evening breeze. Good night, and sleep well.